it's not obvious to me that we're at the stage of post scarcity as you're describing it right now, right? So there are scarce resources, and in fact, due to natural, like the I mean, even outside of competition for like status or you know, who you would like to be life partners with, mates and things like that, which is also inherently scarce, right? Um, there is this other issue of natural resources themselves being scarce, which are needed for particular purposes. Or even something as basic as, where you live, right? Real estate is scarce because there can only be one, building or one house, on this particular plot of land. And if I own this particular plot of land and this is where I stay and this is where my family dwells, well, that means that someone else's family, it can't be there. And so there are classes of things which, despite um, all of our transition to an information economy, and despite any amount of innovation in the space of automation that takes place, are going to be scarce no matter what. And so this is actually a good place of disagreement for us, because I don't see that we're anywhere close to what you're describing. But I would be wonderfully interested in knowing what you see as sort of some of the pathways that we might move that way.
Oh, awesome. That's a great question too. So you're talking about sort of a natural competition, like competition for like sexual selection or sexual selection, like the Snoop Dogg song. Damn, I can't talk today. Yeah, sexual selection, or like where are we going to build what, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of a these are issues that any community is going to face, right? Even like, if we imagine like the ultimate post-scarcity community where everybody's all blissed out and happy and enjoying themselves and painting pictures and frolicking in the fields with their children, etc., you're still going to have an element of competition, right? And I think that that's just something that everybody's just kind of got to deal with, right? And I think the important thing is to be able to be dynamic when it comes to that. I envision, for example, something to deal with that is if you had uh, an app on your phone. And again, we have a situation now where all of the regional data is being collected, which is the situation that we have right now, right? Almost all data on all things is being collected, but except for where is that going? Is that then being open access to the members of the community? No. Is it getting hoarded and then sold off to different agencies and companies so they can better learn how to market to us? Yes. The latter is very problematic. However, a good thing about that is that the kind of the infrastructure is there. It just needs to be redistributed. And then we have an interesting conundrum of privacy, where actually this reality that we share has been post-privacy for a very long time. But what it has not been is post-privatization and post-privatized data. So we're operating under this illusion of privacy where we can hide some of our personal information from Jeannie next door, but the NSA, they know us better than our own mom, right? But with that infrastructure already in place of data that being collected, and with then a move towards post scarcity to have that data being redistributed so that it's open access. First of all, it does two things, probably does more than two things, but there are two things that it does that I want to talk about. So one is that it really strongly puts the impetus on the community to come together and protect each other, because obviously if all data is because it's already being logged. So now the question is what to do with it. Do we continue letting certain corporations hoard it, or do we let it be free, let it fly free? And if we do the latter, which we're at that crossroads now where we have to choose, then it does raise questions of like, what about the perverts who want to track your kid's route to school, etc. And what it brings into question then is this idea of the attachment village, a term coined, I believe, by Gordon Neufeld, who's a very good psychologist. This idea where a child's the people within a child's community, the people with whom a child are bonded to, are also bonded to each other, and in that way they are communicating with each other, like, oh, I just saw so and so leave school. So, you can expect him home in X amount of time. And on the way home, he says hi to his neighbor, and the neighbor is like, okay, watching out for you. I've got your back, that kind of thing. And obviously this atmosphere of cooperation greatly reduces um, the splintering effect that growing up tends to have on children in this modern age, wherein there's the advent of peer orientation. Um, can I woman-splain peer orientation to you real quick?
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, so peer orientation is when the bond, because you see, children, they mold their behavior around the behavior, or like, sort of they copy, they emulate the behavior of the person with whom their bond of attachment is the strongest. Now, in children who have been in preschool since they were 6 months old, being dropped off at 6 in the morning and picked up at 7 in the evening, very soon their primary bond of attachment becomes with their peers, because in the large groups of children and the children to adult ratio, it's very unlikely that that child is going to be able to form a very strong bond, a very strong kind of like unique with that kind of idea of like, I cherish your heart, with the caregiver in question who's in the preschool. Although a lot of caregivers can do very, very well. I've seen that firsthand. There's just, at the moment, there's not, especially here in Ireland, which is where my experience is of childcare, there's not an adequate adult to child ratio. And so what these children end up doing, they want to give you their heart. They want to be loved. They want to be accepted and validated. And they start trying to give their heart to their peers. And a little 5 or 4-year-old is just as likely to say, I love you, as I hate you, you're not my friend, I don't like your shoes. And then, they'll forget about it the next day, but the hurt really cuts deep for these children. And so, that is a source of trauma. But even without that, we have the situation where these peers forming these, these groups of young people forming these very strong bonds of each other, these kind of self-referential bonds where they start copying each other's behavior, keeps them in this loop, in this feedback loop of immature behavior, and kind of breaks off the traditionally vertical transmission of culture, and makes culture then be a phenomenon which happens kind of in these isolated generational pockets, between the youths and the companies which then market to them, making them very easy prey to be manipulated. Which is not to say that there are values that our ancestors had that don't need to just be forgotten, but preferably not forgotten. Preferably learned from, understood, and then perhaps built upon or transcended.
And certainly not, imposed by distant corporations.
No, absolutely. And then what was the other thing you were saying about I forget. I had another point, but I forgot what it was. I wanted to talk about plots of land. Did I already do that when you were talking about competition and stuff like that?
I mean, you
Is
briefly
that a few
addressed
points ago?
yeah, natural competition and the sort of, inherent scarcity to certain kinds of resources and access.
Something that could really help with that, would be if we, let's say this open access, open source, reduced waste, resource-based economy was, it was available on an online platform which anybody can access at any time, right? So, you can have like things like maps of the region in question that you live in, with all of like, these little different points. This resource was sourced from here. Here is your local tool library, and the tools came from here, here, and here. This tool library is also a maker space, and the energy used to power that, and the types of tools used here are this, that, and this. Are we happy with this as a community? Do we want to have a meeting to discuss this? Blah, blah, blah. And then you could potentially have something like on your phone, where you hold up your phone to this great big plot of land that you want to build on. You hold it up, you scan that plot of land, scan it into your Global Redesign Institute, Dymaxon, whatever the heck it's going to be called, app, and you see, well, who else is interested in building on this plot of land now? Deet, 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 3 neighbors are also interested. So then what do? You go with them, you meet up, you converse, and you figure it out. And I think, in this, we've become so, what's the word? Dependent in a sense, not everybody obviously, but generally there's the sense of we need the government to tell us what to do, we need the boss to tell us what to do, and before that we need the teacher to tell us what to do, which is actually very counter to having a creative experience of learning. But that's, we can circle back to that, as you Americans say. But because we get so dependent on this idea of being told what to do, the idea of just like, oh, well, we all want to build on this plot of land, so we'll meet up and figure it out. Let the chips fall where they may. Maybe you don't end up getting to build on that plot of land because your other neighbor has a more compelling reason to do so. Maybe you end up building some sort of community thing. But it's that idea of not to be afraid of confrontation, not to be afraid of a little bit of community disagreement, because the important thing is that there is equality of expression, and that things are getting to where they need to go in terms of, like, the reduction of poverty, and the issue of resource access, etc. And then, and everything else from that, we need to have a little bit of confidence. I certainly have the confidence that with people's basic needs met, cooperation will become a little bit more easy. You might get 2 people fist fighting over that plot of land, but it's not like we need to. And this is an issue that I think some people who identify with that idea of futurism face. We don't need to design everything to a T. Oh, what's going to happen when people disagree? Well, here's my 5-point plan of how we're going to manage conflict, and there's this, that, and the other, and oh, there's going to be a reconditioning center for anyone who's anti. Like, no, like, just like chill out, lay the foundation for what needs to happen. It's very clear. Just get things going where they need to. Have a equality oriented resource economy that's optimized towards nonviolence, equality, repeating myself. And then from there, let the people in those communities figure stuff out for themselves, because people aren't stupid. People are disenfranchised, people are traumatized, people are locked into survival mode. But, it's a community issue. So that should be up to the communities, I think.